everybody. What a fantastic crowd. I mean, I've already heard so many wonderful stories, and there are so many people that I want to speak to. This is the launch of a timely, inspirational, and very important survey, Afraid to Speak Freely, and it comes from Freedom in the Arts. Now, Freedom in the Arts was set up by Rosie Kay and Denise Fahmy. They are two very special, very courageous women. Now, my name is Vivienne Parry. I am not in the arts at all. I'm a scientist, I'm afraid. But my husband was in the arts, and we would have many discussions about, okay, so science explains life, and he would say, yes, but the arts give it meaning. And he was always a huge supporter of Rosie's, and I know he would have wanted me to be here with you tonight. So what we're going to do, we are going to have a conversation with Kate Maltby. We are going to have Joe Phoenix present the results. We're going to hear from Toby Young, and then we'll hear from Rosie. I promise we won't keep you on your feet for too long, and then we will release you into the wild with more alcohol to have the discussions that need to be had after such a launch. So let me turn to Kate Maltby. So Kate, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Kate is a newspaper columnist, as many of you will know. She's deputy chair of Index on Censorship, and she's a former chair of the Drama Critics Circle. So Kate, you're one of those people who is on all sides, all parts of the Venn diagram. Sorry, it's science again. All parts of the Venn diagram, because you are both in the arts, being an arts journalist, but you also, through your work in Index on Censorship, have this experience of censorship. So, I mean, we think, of course, of Index on Censorship primarily about journalism, but censorship, it seems, from this report, also applies to the arts.
You know, I've been to the type of dance shows recently where that would be considered a sort of experimental fake-out play with the limits of technology. But thank you thank you for your kind introduction. Also, thank you to you, Vivienne, and to Rosie and to Denise for having me here, because actually it is a real honour to stand alongside the women who are behind this report and behind this organisation. And I think, you know, let's start with, you talked about my work as an arts journalist. I think anyone who's read my columns on harder news subjects would have no surprise that I like to be outspoken, I would hope, and brave at times. But in my writing for the arts world, I would say I have often not been able to stand alongside women who have been censored in the arts recently as proudly and as boldly as I would like, because even the arts press is so completely captured. And because fighting for the opportunity to write that column or to make that point is still, I mean, we have miles to go within even the arts press.
We do think of Index on Censorship as about journalism, but censorship in the arts is very much alive, it seems to me. Is that your experience?
Yes, so 2 points. Firstly, I don't speak corporately for Index on Censorship. Our wonderful CEO, Jemima, is here and is hugely supportive, and you can grab her later. But I think as someone who, you know, my commitment to Index on Censorship comes from a long-standing concern that if you do not have freedom of expression, you don't have art. And actually, I was drawn to Index on Censorship. I had heard of Index on Censorship as a child, which is pretty unusual. I don't think most sort of 8-year-olds grow up knowing what an organisation called Index on Censorship is. But because my family background is Hungarian and Eastern European, and I was raised with that deep understanding of what our relatives were still experiencing behind the Iron Curtain, what some of them had escaped from. And of course, every totalitarian regime, we know, the arts. I mean, the the repression of political and of artistic speech is absolutely interlinked. But I think the problem, I will not be surprising anyone in this room today, I think, if I say that the arts industry in this country is absolutely captured by people who think they are being politically brave, who think that they are radical, but who have allowed themselves to think that a certain kind of questioning, a certain kind of independence from the group is hateful. And that's the problem that we're dealing with. And it comes, ironically, from a complete lack of empathy. And empathy is, after all, what art is supposed to be all about.
So you have censorship on one side, but then you also have self-censorship, which seems to me to be actually almost as pervasive.
Yes, and I think one thing I want to make very clear, and this is something that I've seen over and over again with the people we do work with at Index on Censorship, but also in the arts world, self-censorship is not a lesser form of censorship. And it's not something cowardly and purely internal. It's not that people just don't have the guts. It is censorship in the hardest sense because it comes from very accurate observation of what happens to those people who don't self-censor. So actually, I wonder, I mean, it's a bit late for the methodology in this report, I apologize, but so I don't mean to undermine it, but I actually think we need a different word because self-censorship sounds like you're doing it to yourself, and you're not. Other people are doing it to you because they make examples. They make examples of people like Rosie. You know, they chuck people out and then they expect everyone else to fall into line.
Now, why does this matter so much? I mean, I know all of you are passionate about this, but if you were just meeting someone in the street, why is this so very important, not just to the arts, but actually to the UK?
Where to start?
To have freedom of expression in the arts.
Well, I think the first thing to say is that I love the arts. My first love is theatre. But, you know, I accept that there's the odd musician in this room and there might even be the odd sculptor. And, you know, possibly what you do has value too. Sorry, I'm being facetious. I love the arts. And although I am someone who... Look, I'm going to be honest. I think there are probably people in this room, I can name a couple, who think that I'm about as lefty and drippy as anyone they've ever met. Most of the people in the arts world who I interact with think I'm somewhere to the right of Attila the Hun. And yet, despite the fact that I know I've picked about the only sector in the world, or at least in this country, where I am, I think honestly, to many people, beyond the pale, I continue to stick with it and I continue to write about it, and I will continue to pursue opportunities to write about and celebrate the arts, because without them we don't have empathy in this country, we don't have creativity, we don't have intellectual freedom, and it baffles and demoralizes me that this sector, which is supposed to be about all of those things, is itself the centre of shutting down speech in this country. And I do think these are issues that are going to be tested in a much larger sphere soon. Because I think if you look at, for example, the reaction to the Supreme Court ruling recently, I mean, it's possible that your social media feeds are not as dominated by actors and musicians as mine, but the absolute falling into line of course this is disgraceful, this is fascist, we won't accept it, was followed very soon by a succession of theatre venues, many of which are publicly funded, saying straight out that they were simply not going to respect the Supreme Court ruling, particularly when it came to toilet facilities. I would be amazed if that is not challenged in the courts. And I think it is a real kind of hard edge of polarization in this country, which is something that in my broader life I spend a lot of time thinking and worrying about, our complete division into tribes apart from each other and unable to speak to each other. Because what we have is a series of venues, and these are venues with sensible people somewhere at the top who are thinking about their bottom line and their balance sheets and their needs, who I think are actually making from their own self-interested position a rational decision, which is that their stakeholders are so captured that it is less dangerous for them to flout the law than it is to confront that groupthink in their sector. And that's just one industry, but it is not the only industry in which we are seeing massive generational conflict, a set of people coming at each other from completely different priors. And I think if that explodes, it's that kind of conflict is going to spread into other sectors as well. And I would be, like I say, I would be amazed if there is not a test case over a theatre venue refusing to implement the Supreme Court guidance.
And I think there are a group of arts administrators who are caught in the middle, who see their organisations that employ a lot of people with that have very scarce jobs in the arts, and trying to keep something on the road. So I do feel a little sympathy for people who are challenged on all sides by, financial existentialism coming towards them.
Yes, and as I've said before, whenever I talk about this, I don't think you can talk about censorship in the arts without talking about the existential threat to the performing arts industry that was COVID. Most theatres, concert halls, art galleries that I look at are still dealing with the deficits. Sometimes, if they're subsidised theatres, they're deficits. Sometimes they're COVID loans to commercial producers that still need to be repaid. And although it is tempting to simply condemn leadership when it is cowardly, a lot of these leaders of venues, I think galleries are very much the same, have had huge churn. So you get new CEOs who haven't been there very long, who are there for very short-term handovers because there was this massive burnout after COVID. The number of CEOs of theatres who just about got their theatres through that period and then just all resigned en masse because they were exhausted. So there is a lack of institutional memory and a real aversion to risk. And there, yes, I would be sympathetic, but I think our job, in part, is to support and to educate.
And to make it actually less risky for them.
Yes, to make it less risky and perhaps, dare I say, to bite people's heads off because that is what the other side do.
Okay. Let's now think about the last time there was a survey done, which was the Art Professional 5 years ago. How has the situation changed since then?
Well, I think the obvious answer is it's just continued in one direction, hasn't it? And I actually wanted to sort of register my thanks to everyone involved in this survey as an arts journalist, because the fantastic thing about having this quantitative research is that it really confirms and makes concrete things that I've been hearing off the record for years. And part of the nature of self-censorship is the fact that I have people telling me all the time about, being silenced or censored in their companies, but then they'll say, oh, of course you can't quote me on that. No, of course you can't actually publish anything on that, or if you do, you can't give my name or any identifying details or all the rest of it. And that is why this kind of dispassionate and anonymised survey is so important. I would say, looking at the Arts Professional survey from 5 years ago, a real focus there, I think 80% spoke about experiencing self-censorship, but very particularly about practicing self-censorship, but very much in terms of funders. And I think it is still the case that threats to funding are a huge part of people's thinking. But my understanding,
entirely understandable.
And entirely understandable. But others may want to go deeper and further into these two reports. But my understanding is that we are seeing much more in this contemporary report about self-censorship as dictated simply by social peer pressure, the power of social media, the horror of being picked out as that one person who's denounced, and that in that sense it's actually less institutional. I mean, we've since, well before the Medicis, we knew that funders dictated politics in the arts. But I think we're seeing a fragmentation of that kind of top-down censorship. And what frankly many of us already knew, which is that the arts, it's a collaborative industry, which is one of its great strengths. You can't make a play unless you have a team. But that team and that social organism is the driving the driving engine of groupthink. And we're seeing that in this report in a way that I don't think has ever been spelt out in quite so much before.
And where do you see this report going next? I mean, I know that Rosie is going to outline what she would like to see as next steps, but from an arts journalist point of view, what would you like to see this report achieve?
Well, I think, as I say, giving people like me some facts and figures to back up what we've been saying is incredibly helpful. My fear, though, is that we are already too polarized to... we've gone beyond the point of sort of gentle education of people. And I mean, following the Supreme Court decision, I would be amazed, as I say, if there isn't, if we don't see more test cases and more legal action. And I hope that reports like this will embolden people to go beyond the point where they're giving freedom in the arts researchers anonymous survey responses. They see how many people feel as they do and might actually be prepared to put their names on the record in the future. I would say, though, that my concern about reports like this is that we are, as I said, we've gone through a process where anyone who speaks out against conventional, frankly, hard left lines has been dehumanized. Women who raise concerns about transgender ideology, about the most basic things like, could we have a toilet in the Old Vic that men can't come into?
Could we even have a toilet there's not a queue for?
Well, I mean, the two are linked. The two are linked, aren't they? There has been such a dehumanization of women who raise such concerns that I think it's frankly still hard for reports like this to be heard and to be heard empathetically. And it is, as I say, tragic in a sector which is supposed to, empathy is supposed to be the muscle of the actor, isn't it? The muscle of the artist. I think I would also say we are at this moment in history where we see Trump in America taking over the Kennedy Center, presenting himself as some kind of champion of free speech, while he himself is exerting greater and greater control over the arts. I know there may be people in the room who disagree with me about this and who recognize that, unlike the American Democrats, he has actually stood up for basic biological reality. But I think what I would say, and this is an index on censorship attitude, and it may not be everyone's attitudes here, is that what's really important about this report and about so much of the work of anyone who cares about freedom of expression of the arts is that it's absolutely consistent about the principle of freedom of expression and about the importance of standing up to anyone who attempts to clamp down on the freedom of artists. And, I, for example, sometimes find some of the pro-Palestinian activism in theatre absolutely bonkers. But I think it's hugely important that people are allowed to challenge my views when I go to the theatre. I love being challenged. The problem, of course, is that only one type of challenge is ever made in British theatre, and that is infuriating. But unless we are absolutely true to classically liberal values and defend everyone's freedom of expression, we will not be able to defend our own position and to defend reports like this.
That's a perfect point at which to go into the report itself. Kate Maltby, thank you so much for talking to us. So could I ask now the author of the report, Professor Jo Phoenix. She's inaugural Professor of Criminology. That's nothing to do with the what's going on at the University of Reading and Deputy Head of the School of Law. Jo, come and tell us about the survey.
You'd think that criminology would have nothing to do with this report, but it actually has everything to do with the report. And not because we're talking about crime. We are talking a little bit about justice, though, and it's probably worth saying for many of you who won't know, although I identify as a criminologist, I'm actually a sociologist, right? Sorry.
Criminal sociologist.
No, in fact, I'm actually an organizational sociologist. So I spend a lot of time thinking about how organizations work. And when I was asked by Denise and Rosie to help with this, it was both a tremendous honor, but also a very big burden because we needed to get it right. And so I hope I've done justice to the good work that Rosie and Denise have done. I'm not going to talk a lot. I'll summarize the report a little bit. But before I summarize it, I just want to make a note about the methodology. So Denise and Rosie basically borrowed the methodology of the Art Professional Survey from 2020. This was a very good thing to do because it gave us a point of comparison. And so in the report, you'll see various points of comparison. But I want to make another note before we talk about the report. We had nearly 500 responses. That is a huge number of responses to what is basically an anonymous open survey. And it mirrors the number of responses that the art professionals had, but it also mirrors the number of responses that came out from a museum's survey called Sticks and Stones that had slightly more, 510. So we're beginning to build up a picture, if you like, of the workplace culture for people in the arts. Now, the main findings, for those who haven't had a chance to read it yet, the main finding, I think, is threefold. And I just want to summarize what that is and then make a few comments afterwards. So to me, the main finding, and I hope that it comes across in the report, is this, that there is an absolutely overwhelmingly oppressive culture in the arts sector. And it's not just an oppressive culture. It's an oppressive culture of conformity to a very relatively narrow set of ideas on some of the main political, social, and economic issues of today. I mean, it strikes me as one of the most depressing things that we could have is an arts sector that's unable to actually freely and openly discuss, present ideas about the key issues of today. There should be, in the arts, there should be a rich and diverse culture of ideas. There should be, and I hate to use this phrase, but it's the only one I could think of, we should see 1,000 blossoms blooming, but we don't. What this report shows is that actually we have an ecosystem that has only 1 or 2 flowers in it. That's it. A devastation of a rich ecosystem. And I think this culture of conformity, to me, the touch points, you know, they'll come as no surprise to you. What are the main dangerous topics? And we called them dangerous topics because that's what came out of the survey. Now, it's worth saying that in the open texts of the open text comments of the survey, there were tens of thousands of words. This wasn't just a few little words that people dashed off. There's a lot of text in it. And what came across was very, very clear. The dangerous topics, the topics that could be career-ending, to use a phrase, are anything to do with discussing gender identity, ideology, and sex-based rights. That was the top one. Critical race theory followed shortly by Israel and Palestine. And I just want to stop there for a second, right, and take on board what that's saying. So the main discussions about women's rights and what that means, about how we deal with ethnicity and race difference, and about how we deal with a conflagration in the Middle East are too dangerous to talk about in the arts. That's damning, just simply damning. And of course, after that, we have immigration and Brexit. It's still bloody going. God. Yes. So those are the 5 main topics. Now, the real question for somebody like an organizational sociologist such as myself, so I've come out now, I'm not a criminologist. I'm detransitioning. Is this, how is that conformity maintained? Now, Kate and Vivienne were talking about censorship and self-censorship. I want to shift the focus a little bit about that, because I don't think it is, I mean, clearly it is censorship and self-censorship, but that censorship and self-censorship is underpinned by an extraordinary culture of bullying. That's all it is, plain and simple. It's bullying. And what does that mean? That means that when people speak out, they fear reprisals. They can get quietly cancelled. They can experience what Jenny Lindsay, who I think may be in the room, yeah, Jenny Lindsay, has so beautifully invoked the metaphor of hounding, which I think is really the metaphor that we need to concentrate on for this process. And that all of that creates the most enormous culture of fear, which we've already talked about in the discussion. Now, weirdly, when I was preparing my few thoughts to speak tonight, I thought, how would I convince a skeptic that this is going on? I mean, apart from, the cold fact, hard numbers that are in there, how would I convince a skeptic? And I thought, well, actually, all we have to do is look around us for the last 2 weeks. Because all of the tactics, all of the culture, all of the things that the report is talking about has been writ large across our nation, across the 4 nations since the Supreme Court ruling. All we have to do is look at the extraordinary letters that are going around from the arts sector, going around from universities, from unions, just about everywhere you could look, it's happening. And these open letters, what they are doing is encouraging people within that sector, those unions, those employment places, to act unlawfully. That's again, one of the moments that you just have to stop and think, hang on a second. So we've got all of these open letters encouraging people to break the law about something really fundamental, and that's the conditions in which women are able to name the issues that are in front of them and discuss them, which is just extraordinary. So I thought, we can talk about the ESRC, sorry, that's sociology speak for a second, EHRC. We can talk about that, we can talk about the Supreme Court, but to my mind, what these open letters and indeed the report hopefully shows you is that the thinking on the other side, if you like, is so entrenched that it becomes a moral virtue to break the law. Now, in the report, there are a lot of personal quotes, and we chose those quotes because, in a sense, they each, in their own ways, highlight one or other of the aspects of how people suffer from fear. Now, I just want to come to the self-censorship thing. Kate may be right. Maybe we need a different word for self-censorship. There's a story that's in the report, and again, I really encourage you all to read it. But one of the stories was about a poet who said that so deeply ingrained was the self-censorship that he no longer allowed himself to even think about the dangerous topics. Now, to me, that's an individual, an artist's life of work that will never happen because they can't even think about it. And then that made me think about Stephen Biko. How many of you know who Stephen Biko was? Just a hands up. Great. There was a quote. I was desperately looking for it all day today, and I haven't been able to find it. And if any of you know the quote, please come and grab me afterwards and tell me it. But basically he said, and I'm bastardizing the quote, and I apologize for that, but basically he said, you can oppress people by chains, but it's far more efficient to capture their minds. And I think this is what comes across from the report. So I'm going to wind up now. And I want to end on something that's perhaps a bit of a happier note, because sadly the report does make for rather grim reading. We have had now several years of diagnosis of the problem. We know what the problem is. We know there is viewpoint intolerance out there. We know that that viewpoint intolerance is backed up by a culture of bullying and harassment that goes completely unaddressed. So we have workplaces where there is no justice at all, where the laws are being flagrantly broken, to huge damaging effect to individuals. And many of us in the room will have known exactly what that feels like. So we know that. We have diagnosed this problem well. We have diagnosed it again and again and again. And it's not just us. Other people have diagnosed it too. So to end my tiny little talk here, I want to say what I hope for this report is that we can move out of the diagnosis phase and into the, oh, I was about to swear, and into the treatment phase. We desperately need our leaders in this sector and others to stand up and to start addressing the problem that we have, or at least not to stand by the mass harassment that is currently taking place. So thank you.
That was terrific. Thank you so much. If there were any burning questions about the methodology or any of the specific findings, then we could just take them very briefly. What I would say is that you said, how would you convince a skeptic? Well, I'm not in the arts, so I would say immediately you need to make a piece of art in order to get people to understand what's going on. So why can't the arts do that for themselves?
Culture of fear, people are...
Culture of fear, all those things.
Has been made in the form of two novels, can I just say? Two novels by Simon Edge, who completely deconstructs this whole thing. The End of the World is Flat, and the other one, which I edited also.
Fantastic.
If you want to watch, here it is.
It had to be shown in Poland.
Yeah.
No one here will show it.
Oh.
But you can come and women create, and you'll see it on exhibition.
Jo,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And she is available afterwards for anything that you'd like to ask her.
Really anything. Thank you.
And I'm delighted to say that we now have Lord Young of Acton, General Secretary of the Free Speech Union. Toby, do come up here, because you've done something very special for this crowd at the Free Speech Union. Tell us a bit more about it.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Good to see everyone. Sorry I was a little bit late. Well, first of all, congratulations to Rosie and Denise and to everyone involved in setting up FITA. It's a great achievement. I know how hard it is to start new things, new organisations, so well done. As you say, we've done quite a lot of work at the Free Speech Union helping people who are designated in our Salesforce database as creatives. So we've helped 88 creatives since we were formed 5 years ago, including Rosie and some other people who are here, like Martin Speake. We've helped the children's author Rachel Rooney, the Scottish poet Jenny Lindsay, the cartoonist Stella Parrott. So many people who've got into trouble for being on the wrong side of the current ideological divide and have suffered for it. So it's great that there is another organisation that's devoted specifically to helping people in the arts who are threatened with cancellation. And I don't know if this has been mentioned already because I was late, but FITA and the Free Speech Union have just set up a new fund with the help of the Deviate Legacy Trust, specifically to help performing artists who've been penalised or threatened with being penalised for exercising their right to lawful free speech. So if you are a performing artist and you've got into trouble for saying something you shouldn't have, check out the FAQs on our website. I think they're on your website too, which will tell you whether or not you're eligible for a grant. When I think about all the artists who've been cancelled, particularly in the last 10 years or so, I'm always reminded of the degenerate art exhibition that the Nazis organised in Munich in 1937. And this was for people whom Hitler disapproved of, disliked, mainly people who challenged the prevailing orthodoxy of Nazi Germany. And Hitler described them as chatterboxes, dilettantes, and swindlers. These were the artists he was singling out as artists that had no place in respectable society, artists who he thought had very little artistic merit. And as I'm sure you know, the artists that were included in this exhibition included, George Grosz, Paul Klee, Otto Dix, Picasso, Mondrian, Chagall. So it's safe to say Hitler wasn't a great judge of artistic merit, but I think the fundamental mistake was to judge art according to its conformity with the prevailing ideological orthodoxy of the day, which is, of course, why so many artists have been cancelled, because they've fallen on the wrong side of that orthodoxy. But I think the number of great artists that were included in the exhibition of degenerate art also hints at the fact that those artists who do challenge the prevailing political dogma of their era, it may inhibit their success, they may get into trouble, they may be singled out as degenerates, but actually, on the whole, they tend to be much better than the artists who are held up for approval by the commissars of good cultural taste of the day. So I wanted to propose a toast to the chatterboxes, dilettantes and swindlers. And I want you to know that if you get into trouble for being on the wrong side of a fashionable ideological divide, Rosie, Denise and I will have your back.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Now, who else to finish this off than the splendid, the wonderful, the one and only Rosie Kay.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Ladies, gentlemen, lords, baronesses, ladies, friends, colleagues, and brave souls. Welcome and thank you for coming to the launch of Afraid to Speak Freely, our first major report from Freedom in the Arts. Now, we've always had our taboos in theatre. Never whistle in the wings. Never wear green on stage unless you're playing the Wicked Witch. Never say good luck, you say break a leg, or in dance, toi toi toi. And of course, you never utter the name of the Scottish play inside a theatre. Heaven forbid somebody bring peacock feathers into the wings. It's said they invite bad luck, but perhaps today they just invite a safeguarding meeting. We've always understood that performance lives on a knife edge, that a little superstition protects something very sacred. But here's the thing, we used to know where the lines are drawn. Now the new taboos come without warning. You don't realise you've said the forbidden thing until it's too late. There is no red line, only shifting sands. And the taboos have changed. You might not even realise that the verboten thing has been said until the email arrives, the event disappears, or the invitations stop coming. There's a new script, a new speech code, and worse still, no one will tell you where the lines are. But what we're talking about today are real artists and real lives. As one Afraid to Speak Freely respondent told us, I no longer felt mentally safe. It was really in fear, I guess, about being ostracised because I was fundamentally opposed to absolutely everything that was being discussed. Another artist said, people don't care about what my views were. They didn't care about what my views were. That has changed. Now they care more about the person's reputation than the actual artwork itself. They find out you've got the wrong opinion and they don't want to know. That's the culture we now face. Our report, Afraid to Speak Freely, reveals the scale and depth of this fear. 84% of respondents said that they don't feel free to express their views. 80% said that they've faced intimidation and harassment. And these are figures across all the arts and at all levels. These are dancers, playwrights, actors, producers, designers, freelancers, administrators, even artistic directors. We're losing the very lifeblood of artistic work. Doubt, curiosity, tension, nuance, and contradiction. And instead, we're watching a chilling consensus creep in, wrapped in virtue, but enforced with fear. The fear is felt by artists, dedicated people trying to make art about the depths and heights of humanity. So I now want to do just a few thanks for all the people who've helped tonight and this work make possible. Thank you to our very wonderful and generous host, Vivienne. Thank you very much for holding us together. Thank you very much to our funders. Thank you for believing that artistic freedom is worth defending. Thank you. Thank you to the co-authors, Denise, Fahmy, and Jo Phoenix, for your insight and integrity. Thank you very much to our advisory board, many of whom are here tonight. Thank you to the journalists for coming, and friends of the arts. Thank you for being here. And thank you to every artist, both here tonight and those who filled in this survey, for sharing their stories. We thank you deeply. Now, at Freedom in the Arts, hopefully we're just getting started. This report is not just a diagnosis, it is a turning point. FITA's not here just to observe, we're here to act. This report forms the first of many bold actions we're planning. Things like a national conference, regional events, arts commissioning and campaigning work. What we really want to do is start to commission the work that has been unseen, the work that hasn't been made, that hasn't been commissioned, that's left on the shelves. We want to work with the bravest of artists and we want to join them with the venues, organisations and institutions to create a team that helps support the arts getting out to the public, you, the public. And we need your support. We need support from individuals, from organisations, from those who understand that when artists lose their freedom, we all lose something fundamental. Because make no mistake, the future of art in the UK is at stake. This report shows us that too many are being silenced before they've even begun. We must not allow conformity to replace creativity. So I invite you, no, I urge you to read the report, to share it, and to speak up. And let's help build a braver, freer, and more open arts world. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the magnificent Rosie Kay. And Rosie and Denise, where's Denise? I know Denise doesn't like the limelight, but Denise, just come up here. You've done something completely magnificent. You really have. Be so proud of yourselves. Now, there are people in the audience, put your hands up if you're one of them, who were case studies in the report. Put your hand up if there's one here. So do please go and hello. So do please, and one there, do please go and chat to them. And now I think is the time just to congratulate yourselves, to chat and to decide what to do next. This is a turning point. It really is a turning point. And it's a bit like the eye of Sauron, you know, how the light moves on and suddenly you are in the spotlight. You are in the spotlight. So make the time count while you're in the spotlight. Congratulations.
Thank you.